We've all noticed that Hollywood is obsessed with origin stories for superheroes and now supervillains as well. How many times have we seen Uncle Ben being shot? How many times have we seen Kal-El land on Earth and being raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent? How many times have we seen Bruce Wayne being shit scared of bats only to use that fear to become the Batman? How many times have we seen these origin stories in the movies, cartoons and in good old-fashioned comics? The answer is approximately 84 billion times per year. But we finally have a winner, because the Joker movie may be named after the Clown Prince of Crime, but it's actually the ultimate Batman origin story. So let's start with the climax of the film. We'll get straight to the meat of the movie. Joker having inspired, let's call them incels for now, a bunch of guys in clown masks. When I say incels, what I mean is, if actual incels are outcasts from society, loners, rebels who worship the worst people in the world, such as Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, then the link could be made to Joker's crew as well. They've just seen a man kill another man live on TV. They know he's killed these Wall Street guys as well on the tube, on the subway, and they're in the middle of a riot, largely inspired by this guy. They are, in many ways, incels, but we'll get more into that later on in the podcast. Trust me, this will make much more sense in a little while. Just bear with me on this one. Don't get angry and leave a comment. Listen to the end, for Christ's sake, you very miserable people. Have inspired a bunch of incels to cause havoc and panic in the streets of Gotham, we then see probably the worst part of the movie, which also weirdly doubles up as the best part, and allow me to explain, okay? In the middle of a fucking riot, that's a fucking riot, Bruce Wayne and his parents exit a cinema and dash off down the DCU's version of Crime Alley. Now, if you're not aware of how Bruce Wayne's parents died in the traditional way, they walk down a place called Crime Alley. I mean, come on, guys. Well, the street sign's not a clue, unless, ironically, they were stolen, I guess. Anyway, as an aside, in the movie, and indeed in comic history, where is Alfred when the Waynes go to the cinema and then later get shot down an alleyway? I mean, shouldn't he be chauffeuring them from the mansion to the cinema? That's kind of his job, isn't it? Shouldn't he be just hanging around with them anyway? It might be a family day out, but he could maybe, in the Joker movie, phone ahead and let them know there's a riot happening outside. It just seems a bit sensible, you know? I mean, who goes downtown to the cinema when the cinema is on fucking fire? That's just, you know? Anyway, they nip down an alley, away from the crowds of rampaging clowns / incels, but following them is one solitary man in a clown mask. Crucially, it's not the Joker himself. He guns down a piss-poor actor who's playing Thomas Wayne. I thought he was the most wooden part of the film. He had one good scene in the bathroom with Joker, and even then, it was a bit, oaky. And then the killer moves his gun to the right, past the actor playing the young Bruce Wayne, who registers no emotion at the death of his father. No emotion at all, only to witness his mother being shot too. Later on in the film, we have that iconic scene, the vision, the thing that we're used to of from above, Bruce Wayne, head down, parents around him, not looking too pissed off that they're dead, to be honest with you. I don't know why the actors involved with the actual Waynes were so shit, but, I think the whole scene was a genius stroke by the filmmakers behind Joker, as it opens up the possibility of multiple Jokers in future movies. Probably just one, to make it less confusing for fans, but Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is kind of the inspiration for all the other Jokers. Sort of like the incel king, if you will. The irony is that people think that loads of young white men will go around killing people based on watching the film The Joker, but really the incels are within the Joker movie. If you think about it, they are inspired by the bigger loser, and later on torments Batman when he's grown up, because that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, I've said this before in a previous podcast. If you do enjoy this one, then go back and listen to Joker, Is It an Incel Movie, where we really delve into the facts and the controversy surrounding the film and the fears of people. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. The movie is set in the 80s, the early 80s, 1981 roughly, and when Bruce is a kid, obviously. And in any new Batman movies, Bruce Wayne will have to grow up to become the Batman. You're not having a child Batman. That doesn't make sense, but I'd like to see it, if I'm honest with you. Anyway, adult Batman, it's going to take him 10, 15, 20 years to train to be the, great detective that he is. And, if the Joker movie was set in the past and the Batman movie, say, is set in the present, so 1980s and then 2020, that's a good 40 years that has passed. Now, Joaquin Phoenix is 44 years old. Let's assume that the Joker character is a similar age to the actor. That means that we could see Batman versus a pensioner Joker in the future, and I'd quite like to see that one as well. You know, the oldest Joker in the world against a Batman. That'd be quite good. But let's be serious for a second. Bruce has a believable origin story for once, doesn't he? You know, apart from all the terrible acting, Bruce is going to grow up terrified of clowns, like most kids are. It's likely that many versions of the Joker will torment him over the years, and Alfred the Butler as well will get it in the neck from people with face paint on. And ideally he'll dress up as what he's most scared of. Not a bat, but a clown. Hopefully a clown with pointy ears and a utility belt, who maybe drives a clown car instead of a Batmobile. Again, these are all just fantasies I'm giving across here. We haven't actually gone into the meat of the film, have we? Okay, I'll be more sensible. I mean, he should dress up as a giant bat. His name is Batman, after all. But my point stands, it's by far the most interesting version of Batman's origin that I've seen on film, TV, in print, in comics, anywhere that you can think of. That's my personal opinion. I wonder if you agree. Also, because the movie questions what is real and what isn't real, I personally was a little bit annoyed that I didn't pick up immediately that his whole relationship with his neighbour was fantasy. None of it happened. It wasn't until he's sat in her apartment and she goes, "Are you the guy from down the hall?" I was like, okay. And then a few minutes later, the penny dropped. I don't know why it took me so long to understand that possibly most of the stuff in the movie doesn't actually happen. It's all fantasy. And that includes the narrative that Thomas Wayne is potentially the dad of Arthur Fleck, right? Is Arthur's dad a billionaire philanthropist, or was it truly a red herring? Well, the film indicates that, you know, when he gets all the records from the guy from Atlanta, I can't remember the actor's name, Brian Tyrese, something or other, should have googled it, and he gets the records and looks at them. I mean, we're led to believe that's the truth, but could that be some kind of fiction as well in his brain? It's really hard to tell. And that's why when he kills his mother, you're thinking, it's not... Okay, she's a bit of a cow, a bit of a bitch for doing what she did, but really it's a bit of a victim-blaming situation. You know, a lot of people in those situations with an abusive spouse, abusive partner, they can't really do anything about it, even if a kid's involved. It's, you know, you can jump in front of a kid sometimes, but other times you might be just too scared to do anything, you know, and then he just kills her. It doesn't seem like enough, but that does go along with Joker's sort of mindset. None of his killings really make any sense. He just does it impulsively, doesn't he? But I like the fact that we're still questioning whether just maybe Thomas Wayne is the father of Arthur Fleck, and therefore Arthur is the stepbrother of Bruce Wayne. It's very interesting, I think. According to comicbook.com, Thomas Wayne actor Brett Cullen has opened up about his role in the film during an interview with Hollywood Reporter, revealing new details about some of the mysteries surrounding the film as he himself understood them. Quote, "The backstory was that Arthur's mother had worked for Thomas in his home, and she was a beautiful woman who Thomas was attracted to, and it led to a physical relationship." Cullen explained about his conversations with director Todd Phillips. He said, "Later in life, she's in and out of mental institutions, and in my mind, Thomas Wayne put her there." See, that's not abundantly clear in the film, not the first time I watched it anyway, and I like that after the film is finished, those little elements are added just to make you think even more about the movie. Will Gompertz, who's a movie critic for the BBC, says Phoenix plays Arthur's tragic descent in a way which seemingly encourages our empathy, but makes sure he never really gets it. And I think that's where the risk of incel copycat violence doesn't fade away, but one hopes even half-intelligent audience members see Arthur as someone not to emulate. The problem is, one imagines that your average incel isn't that intelligent, and that's where the risk sort of is involved, you know. That's the line that they can't quite see, and they just step over it, you know. Will Gompertz goes on to say, "In Gotham, class war simmers while the media crank up the tension with inflammatory headlines and irresponsible TV shows like the Murray Franklin show that we see at the end, which give airtime to the wrong people for the wrong reasons. The elite live in a pampered bubble without a care in the world, willfully ignorant of the hardships other folks suffer. It might be set in the early 1980s, but it clearly is a parable about the here and now." Which is a very good point. He also goes on to acknowledge what I thought at times as well, is that the film was, quote, painfully slow and, quote, not perfect, but admits it will probably, quote, go on to be a classic. I pretty much agree with all those points. You know, Will's point about the movie being painfully slow at times, that is very apparent. For example, when there's so many scenes with Arthur Fleck having removed his shirt and he's just sort of sat around, possibly covered in bruises, possibly not, just sort of slowly becoming more insane, essentially, and, you know, dancing with a gun and, you know, all these... He's lost a lot of weight. Joaquin Phoenix has lost about 3 stone to play this role. He is, he's completely malnourished. He looks terrible, and it's almost as if the filmmaker said to him, "You know what? You put in all that effort to lose the weight. We'll make 1/3 of this film you without your top on, and we'll just really sort of push that point across." An hour worth of you without your top on, you say. How about 45 minutes? Is that a better compromise? Because it seems like that long. It's like he's forever not fully clothed. And we get the point. You've lost a lot of weight. It's contributing to your character. We got it. Okay, stop fucking ramming that point home. Okay? And that's, like I say, it's painfully slow at times. They could just make that a bit shorter and move on. Maybe put an extra bit of storyline in there, you know, because that movie was 2 hours long, but I felt that it could have easily have added another half hour and still be as entertaining as it was. But instead we got just to look at his very, very skinny torso a bit too much. There's nothing wrong with looking at men's torsos. If anyone here is trying to get offended by anything that I'm saying, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they focused too much on one element in that film. But it's really a minor gripe. I've got much more serious issues with the film, as you'll find out in a minute. Before we talk more about the movie, I just need to talk about my movie-going experience, which is that I am a friendless loner who watched a movie about a friendless loner. Basically, I took a day off work so I could go and see one of the very early showings of the movie on my own, and I was just constantly aware of the stigma attached to that and what people are saying about potentially people going to that movie on their own, and I'm one of them. And I was sat next to someone who went on their own as well, and there were loads of people dotted around, and I was thinking, which one of us is going to do it, you know? Which one of us is going to crack halfway through the movie? But the thing, what spoiled my enjoyment of the movie, and what kind of makes me want to see it a second time, there's 2 reasons why I want to see it a second time, because all the real and unreal things, I want to just double check that I'm got it all sorted in my head, and I know, or at least I think I know for sure what's real and what's fantasy in Arthur Fleck's head. But the second reason why it was ruined slightly, just the first 20 or 30 minutes, and it's just a personal experience. There were people halfway down the aisle I was sitting in just whispering really loudly at every single thing that happened in the movie, and I don't know why people do that, because you can hear that noise all the way at the other end of the aisle where I was sat. And there were so many people around them who must have been able to hear it even more clearly, and it must have been even more annoying, and no one gave a shit. And I was the guy who stood up and leant across a few people and told them to be quiet. And that makes me potentially the killer in the movie theatre, that is. I was so close to becoming that guy who snaps, potentially. I mean, that's the opinion of everyone around me, I'd imagine. It just probably flashed in their mind, oh my god, is this guy going to murder us all? No, he's just telling someone to shut the fuck up. But, you know, it's a thin line, isn't it, you know? Also, did anyone notice the giant rat running past when Arthur Fleck was just walking down Gotham Street? It's really blink and you miss it moment, but I did love that little touch of CGI in the movie. Now let's talk about the pros and the cons of the movie. Let's start off with the bad things before we move to the good things. Right. One of the cons is when the Joker kills his clown colleague using scissors, the audience laughed far harder than I would like at the scene where the little person couldn't reach the door lock and needed Joker's help to get out. The audience laughed so hard it kind of distracted from the terror and tension around. Asking a guy who just committed murder in front of you for a favour kind of detracted from that, because they were pissing themselves at the fact that it was a small man joke. Luckily, the kiss on the dwarf's head and the subsequent line about him never being horrible to Arthur Fleck was a very nice touch, I thought. Con number 2, a lot of people have picked up on this. There's a use of a Gary Glitter song in the movie, which I must admit was quite a shock. The scene where Arthur is going down the steps and dancing before the cops start chasing him, it has a song called Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter. Now, I'm not sure UK audiences will actually recognise that song. There are other Gary Glitter songs which are much more well known than the one that's used in the movie. Now, that song in the movie, which hopefully I'll be able to play a little clip of now. It's a song that I've only heard when I watched NFL, the American football, on the telly, right? It used to be a song that's played to G up the crowds, you know, they all sing along. And a song that the NFL, as far as I can tell, for the last 5 to 10 years, have not played in stadiums, probably because they cottoned on to the fact of what Mr. Gigi has done in his life, you know? So it was very surprising to hear a track by that guy. And The Guardian suggested that the director, Todd Phillips, who recently said that, quote, woke culture has torn him away from comedy, end quote, it hasn't, mate. Another article, which I forget, I haven't made a note of here, does make the point that, you know, you say that wokeness is killing comedy, then how do you explain all these multi-billion dollar deals that are being done on Netflix, Amazon, HBO, Comedy Central, etc., for all the comedians in the world have got a special at the moment? So it's not really killing comedy, is it? You know, you just don't like criticism. It's all it is. He said that the Guardian suggested that Todd Phillips was trolling audience by using a song by an absolute monster called Gary Glitter. Right? There's some very dark humour in keeping with the tone of the movie, and I'd suggest that theory is true, as Hollywood must have some checks and balances in place. You know, someone must have had to sign off on musical choices in the movie, you know. I would have turned to the director and said, excuse me, Todd, but that song... it's by a massive paedophile. I mean, it might not be entirely appropriate to generate royalties for a humongous nonce, Todd. But that seems to be what's happened here. I don't know if there's some kind of loophole where he doesn't get the money if it's featured in a Hollywood movie, but it's the first I've heard of it, you know. So very strange decision indeed, you know. Kevin Fallon from the Daily Beast says everything about Joker is absolutely infuriating. Quote, you may find it provocative, you may find it insufferable, you may find it intellectually ludicrous and philosophically empty, but still be impressed by Phoenix. Both things can be true and kind of are. That the film has become this line in the sand when it comes to where we stand as a culture. That is a real danger. Maybe we need a self-examination. This film of all films isn't the one to trigger it, he says. So that's an interesting critique of it. Sinead Brennan from Islands RTE says Joker is chilling, unnerving and absolutely brilliant. She also says what transpires on screen is completely compelling, anxiety-inducing, sleep-disturbing and absolutely brilliant. I do love it when they sum it up in just a couple of words like that. BBC Radio 1 described the movie as being like a baseball bat to the skull in the sense that it's fucking relentless and it never gives up. Guardian's Peter Bradshaw gave it just 2 stars, calling it, quote, the most disappointing film of the year. If you want to get angry at that article like I did, I'm going to leave a link to it below so you can read it yourself. The Verge.com likened Joker to Falling Down, which is something that didn't pop up in my head immediately, but it's definitely a good sort of link there. The film starring Michael Douglas, if you haven't seen it, you have to. They have an interesting theory, quote, love it or hate it, the film does spin up a tempting fantasy of persecution and relief, of embracing nihilism as a means of complete escape from a terrible world, end quote. Time magazine said, Joaquin Phoenix overacts so much that the movie is no fun at all. I mean, it literally is about him, entirely about him. It's almost like first person. It's almost like a documentary. It's supposed to be him all the time. And I can't say, it's hard to, how do you measure how much a supposed insane person is overacting, you know? A person who's got a manic condition where he just laughs at any given opportunity. Again, is that real? Is it not real? Is that made up? You know, it's hard to tell. But the point is, if he's got those kind of conditions, you expect a bit of overacting, surely, don't you? Deborah Ross from The Spectator says, if you ever want to sleep again, stay away from Joker. So, you know, mixed reviews is the point I'm trying to get across now. Some of the pros of the movie, it is entirely centred around Arthur Fleck. Like I say, it's like a first-person thing. It's like a point of view almost kind of movie. There isn't one scene in the movie that doesn't feature Arthur, okay? Everything is from his perspective, pretty much, you know? And I think that's very bold filmmaking. Other characters feature, of course, but only to the point where we see how their interactions with Arthur shape his own life. Clearly, the best thing about this movie is that it revolves 100% around mental health care as well, or the lack of it, and the relation between medication or the lack of medication and the effects it has on mental health. Alongside that is Joker's lack of remorse for becoming just a horrific murderer. You know, as a comics geek, I'm totally obsessed, like everybody is, with Joker and how he just kills indiscriminately and there's no reason behind it. And whilst this film gives a different take on it, I'd like to think near the end of the movie, well, by the end of the movie, we're just watching a man killing for no reason whatsoever, really. You know, people just happen to be in his way and he just removes them the worst way possibly. A good example of that is when he killed his mother. Like I said earlier, I don't personally feel there's enough... Okay, there's never any reason to murder anybody, obviously, but I don't see in his particular life that there's enough, even after he found everything out, there's not quite enough there to then just go and just shut off all of his emotions and put a pillow over her head and kill her. It doesn't make any sense, and that is why he's the Joker. That is why he's perfect. His character is perfect for becoming this monster, you know. Just one more con that I can think of, it's that the movie is just unrelentlessly bleak. It just reminds me of Joaquin Phoenix's other movie, You Were Never Really Here, which I highly recommend that everybody watches, which takes the most horrid, evil subject matter and just shows you it, and it doesn't let up for a second. And it's exactly the same as what happens in the Joker. And I think if the movie's been inspired by Taxi Driver and Falling Down and King of Comedy, you shouldn't forget that it's also probably quite heavily inspired by one of Joaquin Phoenix's earlier movies, You Were Never Really Here. In fact, Bruce Wayne in the film plays a younger version of Joaquin Phoenix's character in You Were Never Really Here. Just a small aside that. Anyway, one of the downsides of it being all about Arthur, all about Joker, is as a result, some of the other characters barely get a look in. For example, WhatCulture.com reminds us that Mark Maron's character, who works alongside Robert De Niro's character, gets about 40 seconds of screen time in total. He was in the trailer, he was sort of bigged up a little bit as being a big part of the movie. He's barely in it. It's essentially about one line that he delivers and a bit of hand waving later on when Joker's going a bit mad on the Murray Franklin show. I'd love to see more of Robert De Niro's character in the movie, Murray, as Joker calls him, but the way the film is shot simply doesn't allow it. That's how the film works, which is both a good and a bad thing, in my opinion. Screen Rant have an interesting take. They say, early on, Arthur imagines himself on the Murray Franklin show as an audience member called up to the big leagues. Then, as he stands on the precipice of sanity, Arthur discovers his romancing of Sophie was entirely fictitious. She never saw his stand-up. She never went on a date with him, helped him care for his mother. He's just the weird guy down the hall to her. Even then, there are big questions unanswered. Was the gun to the head exhaustion? Was it something that plays into Joker's later killings? Is it real, or is it just playing into his desires? And what did he do to the clearly nervous Sophie after leaving her apartment? That didn't even cross my mind that he might have actually killed Sophie when he left. I suppose that really, really good movies can sometimes make you feel like you're the main character. It sort of gives off vibes that make you think, what would I do in their situation? If the whole world seemed like it was against me, if society hated me, would I crack? Would I just basically want to kill everyone around me? And that's kind of a feeling Joker instills in people, and that's where the incel argument comes in again. Are they going to be inspired by this madman to become mad people themselves? And you'd like to think that intelligent audience members can see the difference there and won't be inspired by it, but unfortunately we do get the impression that incels aren't exactly clever, and therein lies the problem. Therein lies the big worry here. Interestingly, while most incels are right-leaning, or more accurately far right-leaning, they are basically indoctrinated by YouTube, Twitter, 4chan, all the boards, all that kind of stuff. You know, these people probably have horrible thoughts, like racists have horrible thoughts to begin with, but they are really egged on by the internet, aren't they? And as a result, they often have far-right leanings. But the followers of Joker in the movie are primarily anti-wealth, anti-austerity, anti-capitalists. They have signs that say "kill the rich." And of course there are various attacks on billionaire Thomas Wayne, both verbally and of course literally. He dies. It's an Occupy Wall Street style movement that quickly morphs into chaos in clown masks, so all the indications suggest that the protesters are actually left-leaning. And therefore, because there have been zero left-wing terror attacks or zero left-wing gun massacres and really very little left-wing misogynists identify. There's a few, but not as much as there are on the far right. It's fair to say that all the talk of movie inspiring incels has missed the point somewhat. Plus, what's weird is I feel a bit stupid. I think you all should feel a bit stupid too if you've analysed this movie as much as I have, and possibly made some conclusions that I have, and possibly admit they might be wrong, because all the clues were there in the trailers, right? No one picked up on those clues. Your Ben Shapiro's and Jordan Petersons could make something out of this anti-capitalist movement in the film and say, oh, do you know what? In the future, all leftists are going to wear clown masks and come after you and kill you and stuff and listen to Gary Glitter. It's strange, but they could make that argument, but they're not smart enough to make that link, in my opinion, and nor are most of the fans of those people. On top of all that, the killings early on in the movie, the three bankers that died on the subway, the three Wall Street guys, three entitled fucks who were harassing a lone woman on a train like a bunch of incels would do if they ever left the house, that is, only to get shot to death by a laughing clown. The supposed king of the incels just killed three misogynists. Talk about mixed messages here, guys. It really is a case of the movie being entirely about one man and how his mental illness turns him into a killer. How he just loses grip on reality and becomes a completely different person and enjoys it is the worrying part of it. It's that simple. Reading into the movie too much seems like an addiction for most people. Says a man who's made 2 podcasts so far about a movie called Joker. I think this is a very interesting film about the breakdown of society. Obviously, the rich don't care about anybody else. That's reflective in real life. And I think all my joking aside from earlier, being quite flippant about some points deliberately, as people are well aware, that's what I do on this podcast. But there is time for some serious points. I think it doesn't matter if you're left or right. When society does break down, you should probably come together and fight the oppressive forces. And one assumes that's what's happening in Gotham during the movie, because at the end of the day, if you are starving, you're going to get a bit upset if you have the energy, obviously, as Joker just about does. I suppose that's another reflective part on society. They're starving, he's starving, but they're all angry. And I suppose because the movie is so focused on just Arthur and everything that happens around him, you don't see any greater look at the breakdown of society in Gotham. And that's something I'd like to see. If the movie was, say, 2.5, 3 hours long, somehow they could just cut away for just a small second and see what people are getting on with there. But you get the rough idea. It's supposed to keep you guessing anyway. And do I think the movie is, as most people think, a 4 or 5 star movie? Well, I reckon 4 star. I think it's missing something that really pushes it towards 5 star status. I think I agree with most people, apart from the one guy who said it's Joaquin Phoenix is overacting. I think he should at the very least be nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars. I don't know if he'll win it. There's plenty of other great people who are tipped to be nominated this year, so it's too early to say really. I won't make any predictions there, apart from I think he will be nominated at the very least. Do I think this will win the Best Picture? No. Do I think the Oscar will go to Best Director for Todd Phillips for Joker? No, probably not. Again, he might just scrape a nomination, but I don't think there's enough for him to win the actual award. But what the fuck do I know how awards sort of ceremonies work? It's just a complete mystery sometimes to most of us. Does the movie have the same desire that some superhero movies have, that you finish watching it and you immediately want to go back and watch it again? For example, for me, that happened with Civil War. Okay, it wasn't the greatest movie ever, but it was loads of superheroes fighting each other, so I immediately wanted to see it again, especially these Samuel L. Jackson bits. Deadpool, the first movie, I desperately wanted to see that again immediately after watching it. Not Deadpool 2, that was shit. And all the Spider-Man films. I know they're not as fun as the Avengers films, but it's Spider-Man, for God's sake. I really want to watch him swing around again, okay? I know that this movie isn't technically a superhero movie, or really technically a super villain movie. We don't know if Joker is Joker after all, or whether it's just an inspiration for others. It is, like I said earlier at the start, kind of a superhero movie in a way. It's a Batman origin story, but that's only probably 1/10 of the film, But do I desperately want to see it again straight after watching? No. but I will go and watch it again just to pick up on the things I might have missed, just to clarify. I'm fully on board with what is real and what is fantasy in the movie. I really want that to be clarified in my mind. People have told me, and I've read critics saying things, I've read articles about it, but I now need to see it personally, and it's a bit of a shame really, because a lot of that movie, like I say, is quite slow, and now I'm going to have to sit through scene after scene of Joaquin Phoenix emaciated with his top off just to see if various things happened the way I thought they happened in the movie. So a bit of a waste of money to see it the second time, in my opinion. The other big thing I'd say is I've seen it mentioned a few places, mainly on Twitter. Do not take children to see this movie. For some reason in the UK it was given a 15 certificate rather than an 18, an adult certificate, where it's really horribly gory and violent in some areas, but more than that, the psychological element of the movie would affect people as much as the violence. In combination, I think that's really bad for a child's brain, basically. I'm affected by it, I'm still thinking about it, not just because I'm a comics geek, but because it's such a powerful movie. But for children, I think you're really running a risk there. If we're worried about incels going mad, imagine what it's going to do to the mind of an underdeveloped mind of a kid, someone who's still growing, maybe going through puberty. All these thoughts, all these emotions running through their head, and then they're thinking their society hates them because they're kids. That's what kids do. You always feel, like a reject, don't you? And if they throw this into the mix, that's not a good thing, in my opinion. I think we should be less worried about incels and more worried about, 13-year-olds going mad. Finally, I like to say that I'm not a massive junkie of Joaquin Phoenix's work. I haven't seen things like Walk the Line and various other movies, but I have tried to catch up on his filmography before watching Joker. I watched You Were Never Really Here again before watching this, wondering what he'll draw from that experience for this particular movie, and it is quite a lot. It's dark as fuck, and so is Joker, obviously, and there's a lot of parallels there. But one movie that I recommend that maybe you haven't heard from him that he's done is called Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, which is an excellent name of a movie when you consider it's a movie about him being an alcoholic and losing the use of his legs in a car accident, which happens when him and his brief appearance in the film of Jack Black, they get drunk, they drive a car, it all goes badly. He's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life and still an alcoholic, a recovering one at times, and it's about him going to therapy and trying to cope with life, and it's dark as always with all of his films. And there's an excellent appearance in there. Co-star is Jonah Hill, and he's almost unrecognisable as a sort of a hippy-dippy gay chap who's in charge of this therapy session, and it becomes at time the movie becomes all about him at one point, and it's incredibly emotional, and highly recommend that movie. It's called Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. And that's it. That's all I've got to say really about Joker and various things like that. It's a hell of a film in one respect. Not perfect, but I'm sure we'll be talking about it for quite a long time. Please let me know what you thought about the film in the comments. But so that just leaves me to sign off by saying, as usual, to people usually turn off at this point, which is fair enough, but I do have to say that if you do want to help fund this podcast, it costs £7, £8 or $9, $10 per month just to use the host site to put out these weekly or so-called weekly podcasts. So if you do enjoy it and you want to help me with those costs over the course of the year, then you can give money some different ways. First of all, the thing that I prefer is if you send me money via PayPal. The links are below in the description boxes, whether you're listening to this on audio or on YouTube. Or you can send me money via Ko-Fi. You can buy me a coffee that way. It's basically just sending me $3 or $4. Or you can join my Patreon and be charged once every 2 months only. That's the maximum, once every 2 months for podcasts in the future in 2020 and 1 or 2 more videos as well. So that's essentially $6 a year. If you only put $1 in each time, it's not much. If you can afford that, help a brother out. Come on, guys. Apart from that, you can listen to this in audio form in various different ways: Spreaker.com, iTunes, SoundCloud, but also it's available on YouTube, where it's going to be regularly uploaded anyway. So if you prefer that, do subscribe that way, and you can hear all of these in the future. And until next time, thank you for listening, and laters, betas.